If you are like most wedding filmmakers, you are constantly fighting against being completely overwhelmed from your backlog. We get it, and that is why we are so excited to bring you howtofilmweddings.com/outsourcing, a brand new place for you to find some of the best editors on the planet to help you get out from under the weight of your backlog. And the best part is we have personally vetted these companies to ensure that you aren't wasting your time finding editors. Whether you are looking for full-blown editors like Wedditor or brideandgroom.video, or if you're just needing someone to cull your films like Wedding Post House, we have a solution for you. So head over to howtofilmweddings.com/outsourcing to check out our curated list of outsourcing experts today. That's howtofilmweddings.com/outsourcing.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the How to Film Weddings podcast. I am Nick Miller and joined by my co-host and best good buddy, Mr. John Bunn. It is April. It is spring. We are doing well. Well, I am doing well. It's baseball season. I love baseball season. But back to you over baseball. John, how are you doing today?
Oh man, I'm great. Spring in Oklahoma is great. The tulips are blooming. We are warmer weather. Wedding season is back. I can feel the love in the air. I just love spring. I love mowing my yard. I love putting grass seed down. I'm a dork like that, but lots of great things going on. In my world, we have lots of fun stuff coming up. Great guest today, McLean from Hello Tomorrow is here to talk about story. But before that, Nick, I just had to throw out a shout out to my good friends over at Wedditor. Just got back yet another film. They've been my exclusive editing company. I've had them edit every one of my films since 2019. And I just love the collaborative effort that I get with Wedditor. It's not like I just send them my films and then they send something back and then I send it to the couple, but we work together. It's kind of like having an editor in the office next door to me. Mm-hmm. And I just literally yesterday or the day before got a film back for Sarah and Mitch for their wedding that we did last year. And they loved it. And I don't know, it just makes me feel really great when I get one of those weddings back. I get it off my to-do list and the couple loves it. They sent me a text right after it was over saying like, eek, that was the best thing I've ever seen in my life. And then they were saying something, I think it was like, I don't understand how it works. It's beyond an art form. Can't even imagine the work it takes to make this film feel so seamless. I'm reading the text messages on the screen here. But it was incredible to be able to trust Wedditor with that edit, get it back, and then send it over to Sarah and Mitch. And this was a wedding where they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on their wedding. They picked me first before even their wedding date. So I wanted to like a place to really trust with my wedding film. So if you're on the fence about Wedditor, be sure to check them out, howtofilmweddings.com/Wedditor. Before getting into this week's episode, though, Nick, you talked a tiny bit about how you are, but anything else going on in your world? Anything new, anything exciting, anything fun? Or do we just want to jump into the episode?
No, I'm just boring old Nick. So
Perfect.
So I think
All
we're good to jump into this week's episode of the podcast with McLean Carlson from Hello Tomorrow.
Okay, here we are with the one, the only McLean Carlson from Hello Tomorrow up in Canada. How are you? Welcome back to the HTFW podcast. What's going on in your world? Say hello.
Hey guys. Yeah, I'm doing great. Everything up in the Great White North's good. We're keeping it together up here, so that's good. But yeah, it's been a busy couple of years, but I was super pumped to be back on the podcast and talk to you guys, do my faves, and stoked to be here. I'm just solo today. Aaron might come by at one point, but it's mostly just me. So you probably lost half your viewership there or listenership, but so be it.
One of the two. I will say that I have enjoyed the last few years. You know, we've had you on a few times, just getting to know you. Nick, I don't know if you remember, but they were at our retreat 2 years in a row. We got to hang out with them IRL.
Thank you so much for reminding me, because I totally forgot.
Well, sometimes, and guys, Nick is deep into his 40s now, so you just never know.
By deep, you mean 1 year.
Yep. And so, and McLean just had a birthday. He turned 35. I know this from my text thread with him. So he's just way younger than you. But he and his wife, Erin, run Hello Tomorrow out of Canada. Their films, I would put them in the ridiculously good category over there in that. Storytelling is really important to what you guys do. That was something that we talked about several times on the podcast, just how you infused your own story, who you are, showed off your own, and just your About Me page, like really changed the game for me of like, oh, like we have these cameras, we can, show off ourselves and like what we care about. And it was like really great for me, learning that from you guys, and then just becoming friends over the last few years. The last few years we've been able to ask questions and get to know you. And story is really big. And we wanted to have you back on because we wanted to kind of just dive deeper into storytelling, because I believe when you can tell really good stories, you will always have work. You will always be able to book weddings. So why don't you give us kind of a little bit of a background of how you really got into, I obviously would assume your first films weren't super story driven or things like that, but kind of what are some of your inspirations and how did you like start to really dive into getting the knowledge that you have today?
Great question. Yeah. So like kind of how it all began and our focus on story. Everyone focuses on story, so it's not overly special, but we really geek out about it. And that mainly started when I went to film school. So my wife and I, girlfriend at the time, we had started Hello Tomorrow, was going well, and I had the opportunity to go to film school, which I was psyched about. I know not a lot of people are into that these days, but I thought it was pretty cool to go to film school. And there I learned a ton about story. Not just like what makes up story, but how to service it in every aspect of filmmaking. So coming out of film school, I thought, hey, let's try and, revamp this whole wedding thing. Instead of doing just really, montages or music videos, let's try and infuse things we learned, especially with narrative storytelling specifically, and try and create a narrative out of this documentary setting of a wedding. So that kind of kicked off, what was it? That was about 15 years ago now, 16 years ago. And kind of has informed how we approach weddings ever since. And we keep on refining and learning more. It's always a process to improve, but storytelling is definitely the part of the process that we enjoy the most.
Yeah. And as I, watch your films and kind of like dissect them, it seems as though that some of these couples, some of the things that you're putting out there, it's like, how in the world, how are you doing this? Like, it's like this, it flows so well. It's so easy to understand. You like are invested in these characters, into these people that have these real lives. And I think I find a hard balance between this is not a movie set, but this is somebody's real life, but also turning this into something cinematic that is story driven, all the buzzwords these days that the kiddos use out there. But like, how are like, you knew that story was important. You went to film school. It shows even in your early films, you're always doing story driven films, or trying to at least. And maybe what's a little bit of your process of like, this isn't a Hollywood studio, but this is somebody's wedding. How do you thread that needle? What does that look like for you all?
For us, because we're the same, we don't want anything like how we shoot is not staged at all. Like, if anything, we could afford to do a little more staging, but it's so just whatever happens. We're a fly on the wall, but we're also, a friend in the room. And for us, what it kind of came down to was structure. I think a lot of people are worried about wedding films being formulaic, which is a good worry. We don't want that. But structure is kind of a four letter word, a bad word, that some people might be, hesitant about. But we have found that structure, when you know the possible structures and work towards it for your film, it can feel cinematic, can feel, evoke those correct or those emotions that really move your audience, even if it's complete strangers. And there's a reason those structures work. So as we delve into that and seeing how we can kind of apply conventional structure into a documentary setting, that's when things kind of were a game changer for us.
Yeah. One thing that Like, do you have anything, sort of kind of talking about, being more, intentional with the structure and, like that sort of stuff. Do you have any little tips or just like little things that can help people? Because I know it's everyone wants to create wedding films where you feel something and it's something is, personal to the couple, but also, very emotional or makes you feel, just from a casual viewer. And so I know that Jen has started doing a couple things as my wife, as she's, going through and listening to audio. But do you have any kind of little nugget things that you guys like to do whenever you're sitting down to try and structure these edits so that, you can really pull out that story or that narrative?
Definitely. So for maybe the most important thing that I'm looking for, other than things that draw or tell about the characters of the couple, because that's a very important part for the viewer to identify with the couple. So you want to make them three-dimensional people, not just a bride and groom or bride and groom and a groom. But the thing I'm always looking for is conflict. And usually, classic storytelling, conflict is key. But on a wedding day, how could there be conflict as they're getting married? And it should be a pretty happy day. I doubt there's conflict. What kind of changed things for us was realizing, there's for sure conflict in the story. It just doesn't happen on the day itself. So listening to ceremony or vows and speeches about stories, maybe about when this couple met and how there was a conflict of, maybe time was separating them. Maybe they were overcoming some kind of obstacle, sickness, family members, anything like that. Even though that to me is something that jumps out because it just helps earn those feelings, because immediately a viewer would be drawn into knowing more about that, and that kind of sets the narrative off. And then overcoming that obstacle, of course, they're getting married, so they overcame it. So knowing the conflicts before the day is also really helpful, and trying to, like, we just start straight up asking couples, like, hey, what conflicts did you have coming to this day? And that is honestly so helpful, and couples are willing to share, especially if you're yourself about it and open. And those things can really make a difference.
Yeah, I think too, especially if you put it in the context of, hey, we want to create this film for you. And while, we're telling the story of your wedding day, we're also telling the story of your story. And like, I think that most couples will really appreciate that, if you do have that relationship with them and you can build that with them. And like, hey, we want to include some aspects of that in there, but ultimately then we'll bring you together, which, just helps tell a better story. Like one we just finished, our couple in Maine, like they met, film we just put out, they met like 10 years ago, and then they ended up not getting together. And then they actually talked about that, in their vows, like the universe pulled them apart, had different plans, but then they brought back together. And so it was really cool. It was like they were able to share that conflict in their vows and stuff, and focusing in on that. I know one thing that Jen does is she sits down and she listens to all the audio, spoken word from the day, and she's just writing down themes of people, things that they say, and like, is there like one common vein that kind of fits all of this stuff together, that we can kind of come back on and focus in on? Because I think there's so many times like, I want to be more story driven, and that it turns into, I really just want to include speeches, or I want to include vows, but there's no rhyme or reason with when you're just getting started, right? And so learning stuff like that, the conflict, learning what some of the themes are and stuff can be very, very beneficial if you want to take steps towards telling better stories.
Yeah. I when I'm looking for those conflict, sound bites, I'm the same as Jen. I'll go through all the audio first. That's my first step. And I'm looking for anything that talks about like the couple or a speech giver talking about how they felt rather than what happened per se. So I'm always trying to find out, okay, how did the groom feel about the bride the first time he saw her? Because that's way more interesting. And then anything that can relate to that, be it in a different speech or a different part of the vows, I make sure to pull that, because that will all, enhance. So I'm very much about, or less about, okay, what literally happened, more about what did the couple feel, or what did someone feel when they say, like, a maid of honor introduced the couple or something. that to me is so much more interesting. And I think most people watching would feel the same, because it shows a lot about the character of the couple, the environment that they met, and kind of set them on the trajectory of coming together.
Yeah, I think just having the awareness that like conflict doesn't have to mean an argument or a fight.
Totally.
Per se. Conflict could be the weather. Conflict could be you're starting the film showing, or the groom as he's standing there nervously saying, "I might pass out." Yep. Like that's conflict. Or a first look's about to happen and then it cuts to something else. There's turmoil. There's conflict. Totally. It's like, are we going to make it? There's a million different ways to like get creative with that. You said a couple things that really stood out to me on that, and the fact that it's like how they feel. Like how did you feel whenever you saw your, then you didn't even know it, but it was your future bride. How did you feel the first time you saw her? It's like, oh, I know exactly how I felt the first time I saw my wife, and I'd love, like, that makes it way more interesting. And totally. some of these things, it's just like, what is going to be more interesting? What things about films or TV shows do you really enjoy? And I don't know if you guys have been watching, but Severance is a show that I've just been gobbling up on Apple TV, and it like you just kind of get put into the middle of this eerie world that's happening, and things just start to kind of unfold, and it's like, oh, like you don't have to start the story right at the beginning. Like they didn't start. It was like you're learning things with each episode. You're like, oh, there's like 3 or 4 more things that I understand, or 3 or 4 more things that are kind of uncovered. And so like there's development through the story. You're learning more, and it's more interesting, and it's like makes you want to keep listening. And once, and so if you think about the way that you're editing, if you're just saying, here's the start of the wedding day, here's some getting ready, here's a first look, here's a ceremony, here's some dancing, ta-da. You're going to lose everybody except for the couple. And yes, that's a good thing. But if you want films that will draw and attract more couples to reach out to you, to really understand some of these things really can take it to the next level. I was going to ask you, or any thoughts on any of that? Because I rambled for a while.
One good thing too, that just to add on the feeling part, when you get sound bites of people talking about how they felt, is it kind of opens the door for you visually that's when you can be a bit more creative, a bit more artistic. So we have, a lot of the time people, when they're talking about how they felt when they saw someone for the first time, they'll speak visually, they'll time slowed down or this or that. And that can be a really good opportunity to like, okay, this is where your filmmaking chops come in. And this is where you can get creative with some stuff that might on the surface seem stagey, like portrait time or what have you, but that's when that can transcend being stiff and weird, portrait shots. Instead, really bring to life that soundbite.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking, there are couples out there, right, that they met one day, they fell in love, they got together. It's like they've been happy. There is no conflict. And so like, this is, kind of what John was talking about, okay, we're at the first look and you can tell the groom's getting emotional. If you start your film with that, but then you don't get to see that resolution, and now you come back, now you have created conflict, at least for the viewer, as totally. Oh, here's this emotional moment. I need to see that emotional. And it's kind of like you're hooking them a little bit. So like the conflict, it can work on both ways, both in the things that they say and how you're putting that together. But maybe if you can't find conflict that way, you can create it in the edit and how you edit and how you piece some stuff together a little bit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. Because conflict, it's a tricky word because like you say, it doesn't mean fighting. A different feeling. Yeah, exactly. It's more, I guess, drama would be maybe a better way to define it, because it's intention and obstacle. So the intent is the couple to see each other for the first time, and then, like you said, you put time in the way of that, and that's your obstacle for the viewer. So I think drama might be a clearer word. I hope people can grasp that, because conflict sounds, like you said, like someone's getting in an argument or something.
Yeah. So I'm sitting here thinking about people that are listening. A lot of people, it's kind of like, a friend asked me to film their wedding. Now they liked it. I made a little montage. Now I'm doing more weddings. Now I'm getting into this thing. And we're not like, like we're trained by ear a lot of the times, to play the song. And as somebody that has actually been trained by the book as well, you understand 15 years ago, I understand things grow and change.
They changed
but
a bit.
like having that background, you say some of these words that like it's obvious that you understand a little bit more of the science behind what's going on. The obstacle you were just talking about is time. And it's like, the way you said that, that's really easy for me to comprehend, but I've never really put it into words. I'm sure that in your, you've got your a course on storytelling. You focus on storytelling. You do lots of mentor sessions. You teach people storytelling. What would you say, like, to somebody out there, like practically speaking, if they're wanting to get more into story, like some easy beginner steps for what should I be doing to like up my story game on my next wedding? Like, what could I do? I've got a wedding in a couple weeks. I haven't really talked to the couple much yet. What would you recommend they do if they've got a wedding in a couple weeks and they want to do better with story?
Yeah, that's tough. I would say it's always smart. I'm a movie geek, so I really like dissecting, classic Hollywood movies. I'm a big fan of that, and there's a lot of value there. Just because they're masters at it, and you can gain a lot of knowledge and bring it into this niche of wedding filmmaking. I would say also to not worry too much about linear or nonlinear. I know it's really cool to go completely nonlinear, but storytelling, like worst case scenario, the wedding day itself is a story. There is a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end. So once you understand that, you can kind of apply that to your film. You can make it obviously way more exciting. But the 3-act structure is kind of inherently in a wedding day itself. And then as you learn more and more about that, you can refine that. And like you were saying earlier, you can kind of start moving the pieces around a bit to make it more interesting. But yeah, even simple education in the like reading some articles on 3-act structure can really help and open a lot of doors mentally about how to approach it. And just getting creative, not worrying too much about the rules. Like you say, I know a lot about the science or whatever, but ultimately those are all things to just absorb and then let your creativity go from there. So I wouldn't worry too much. But the more you learn, the more it will affect your storytelling for the positive, for sure.
Yeah. One thing that I picked up from a long time ago, and I don't know who I got this from, or if it just popped into my brain, or I don't know where, but it was, specifically talking about like time shifting and, showing different parts of the day, where they quote unquote don't belong, right? Reception stuff at the beginning of your film, or, whatever, they still said, or I got this idea, still have some sort of arrow that you're still telling a story kind of chronologically where it still makes sense, even though you're jumping around in time. So, for instance, like one of the things that we do is we're not, unless we're being intentional about it for some reason, like there's a toast that talks about the baller reception details. We're not going to start our film with reception details because those don't belong at the beginning of the film, right? There needs to be some sort of clue with that. But we, it's like, okay, we will do like scenery stuff kind of whenever, we will do couple portrait kind of whenever, but like the main parts of the day are still somewhat pretty chronological. We're going to do getting ready before we do bridal party, before we do ceremony, before we do all these things. Now we might jump back and forth. So I think in me saying all this is whenever you come to edit, if you want to do something that's a little different than chronological, straightforward, beginning to end, figure out some rules for your stuff, and it should make sense to you. I've watched films before and I was like, this, like how this is structured, like this just doesn't make sense. If it makes sense to you, like that's at least a step in the right direction. And then, continue to refine and figure it out. What am I doing? Where am I losing people or whatever? But because we have that straight arrow of we're going to do these things over here, but these things are going to be order is what's going to make sense. I've seen films before where it's like first look, then we cut to getting ready, but it wasn't like an intentional, super emotional first, right? Like it was just, we're going to show this. Now we're going to show this, like have some sort of intentionality behind that.
I think that's really good and I think another way of kind of putting it is instead of maybe time shifting, which sometimes I think people might take not too far, but they might get lost in the sauce with that. I kind of think of it as flashbacks and flash forwards. So say like you have that straight arrow, you have that primary linear structure. And then if you're flashing forward, flashing back, that's awesome. But you're always coming back to that base, so you're coming back to the main path for the viewer. And I think if people realize or think about it that way a bit, it might make a little more sense. The flash forward flashbacks.
Yeah.
Sorry. Forgot one other thing I was going to say.
Share it.
The other helpful tip I would say for someone who's maybe just kind of getting started, when you sit down to your edit, hopefully you know this ahead of time, but if not, that's maybe okay. If you identify your emotional climax, the big moment that you want to serve towards, you want to, point everything in that direction, that can make so much more of the editing process simpler and clearer for you. If you're making every decision, it's a motivated decision towards a goal in the film, it'll make it so much clearer. Sometimes we just try to put everything in, and it just is kind of a jumbled mess. So if you're identifying here's my emotional high point's going to happen about halfway or 3/4 through, everything I do, every decision I make is going to go towards that moment will leave such an impact.
Yeah, that's one thing that I know I've shared before a lot with editing is finding those key, like in the song, the emotional moments in the song or whatever, and say, okay, this is when this speech, which made everyone cry, is going to happen. This is where the first look goes. This is where bride walks down the aisle, or whatever, and put those in then, because I know when I would first start editing, I'd be 2.5 minutes into a 3-minute song, and I'm just now getting to the bride coming down the aisle because I spent way too much time with all this other, and I didn't map it out and plan out that sort of stuff. So really good information there.
We're going to go into our question of the day presented by Wedding Post House, one of our new sponsors. They're amazing culling service. They cull all your footage for you. Head on over. Yes?
Well, I was just going to ask McLean if he has yet to experience the awesomeness that is Wedding Post House. Have you gotten a chance to do this yet?
Is that the question of the day?
No, it's not the question of the day, but maybe it should be.
I have not, but it sounds exciting, actually. That sounds like an interesting take on the outsourcing side.
Yeah, it's outsourcing where you get full creative control still. It's wonderful.
You wanted to interrupt me for that? That's what I was getting to, you
D-bag.
I'm sorry.
Oh, look at this conflict.
We're just all about the conflict here on today's episode and the drama.
All right, so back to our Wedding Post House question of the day. My question to you is, when do you personally, when should people start learning their couple's story?
It should start in the contact form when they reach out to you for the first time. Even if they don't say it outright, but if you can kind of read between the lines, and then that helps a lot. I often actually refer back to our contact form just to.
So how do you do that on your contact form? Like, what are you doing? What prompts? What's going on? Give us the details, man.
I guess it's kind of tricky because we don't really have a specific prompt other than tell us about yourselves. But if you're doing enough storytelling about yourself on your site, likely that will cause the couple to want to share a bit about themselves too. So like you were saying earlier, we have that About Us film on our site, and we've had a few iterations of it. And it's a great first impression because couples immediately feel like, oh, hey, I kind of feel like I already know these guys. So they're much more willing to share. So we have found that to be huge, and people will kind of sometimes even spill their guts in the contact form, and it's hugely helpful for us. And that is another good sign that we're a good fit. But so I would say maybe even then before the contact form on your website.
Okay, so I like this. I'd like to go a little further on this. So you have this information. They've reached out to you. Are you using this information to book them? Are you using or is that just kind of like in the back of your mind? The booking happens. We're getting closer to the wedding. If that's the case, are we sometimes the more you know before the wedding day, the better. How do but also threading that needle of it not being too much of a Hollywood set, kind of like here's the script for the day. How do you balance that? Yeah,
so in that initial contact form, it's more of a back of the head thing, and it helps for sure during the client call, and it just helps us connect with them a lot quicker, and we can relate to things way easier. And that just kind of it all services the relationship building, because we want to go into the day feeling like we're somewhat of fast friends, hopefully more, and that combined with just learning as much as you can about them ahead of time, so you can make your decisions on your end without having to affect the feel of the day to the couple. We all want our couples to enjoy the day to its maximum. We don't want to, get ourselves too involved in, reconfiguring the schedule or doing lots of posing, anything like that. So yeah, learning as much as you can ahead of time goes a long way.
I would say, learning as much as you can ahead of time is huge. Also, don't
be weird.
Yes,
That's
definitely.
a good, yes. Start the episode with that. Don't be weird.
Don't be like, tell
weird.
me about
Don't be
everything.
weird.
Read the room a bit.
Don't
When
be
was
weird.
the last time you sinned?
Deepest, darkest secret.
I was gonna say on a wedding day, I know it's easy for us to be in our heads because we're like, okay, is this person mic'd? Is that person mic'd? Is this person, thinking about all of the stuff that we need to do so that we can do our job properly. But don't forget the power of just being observant and paying attention on the wedding day, because you can learn a lot about a couple just by listening. There was this a film we did last fall, and they had a pretty hype reception time, that sort of stuff. And so I kind of wanted the music that I was looking for, or I was thinking of in my head, was way more, energy and stuff, like almost kind of through the whole thing. And Jen was like, no, we need to do something low key in the first song. Because why are you laughing at me?
I just think about your sweet wife, Jen, and how nice she is, and how sometimes you're just like, Jen was like, no, we will not. We will not do that. And I was like, there's no way Jen said it like that. Anyway, it just made me laugh.
Yes, that is correct. I think I texted John the other day that one of my spiritual gifts is accurately portraying feelings between people. I do such a terrible job at doing that. I just kind of very bluntly say it because that's how I am. But anyway, she's like, you know what? That's a really good idea. But what I think we should do is get this song that's a little bit more mellow, a little bit more chill, because I spent the morning with the bride. That was the kind of music she was listening to. That's how she was talking to her people. Like, she was very, like, I'm calm, I'm chill, I'm zen, like, don't ruin this. And of course, one of the comments that the bride made was the music was perfect because Jen was just paying attention to who they were. She's incredible and she's so smart. And she, like, I think selecting music is like a blessing and a curse. Like, she's so good at it, but it just consumes so much of her time. Anyway, but listening to things, even if you're like, well, they didn't talk about anything about, well, what kind of music were they listening to in the room? What kind of things were they talking about? Just being observant is going to help inform how you should tell their story and get to know them a little bit.
Yeah. Because you don't want the day to feel rigid in your plans. Totally. So yeah, if you're learning as much, absorbing as much, and then go in on the day with, you got your plan if things don't go great, like your plan A, but you should be flexible and ready for anything and impromptu for sure.
And I think a lot of us are, and it's still even 16 years plus into shooting. I'm not so nervous, but there's a nervous energy when they're paying you a lot to be there. They're looking at you as a creative. They're trying, like, you're kind of an outsider, even though you can build relationship. It's like, wow, there's this dude here with this camera with all of us girls, or, whatever it is. But the being observant thing was difficult for me for a while, just because I felt like I had to be on. I felt like they needed to be entertained by me. I'm an extroverted personality. And so it was just like my nervous reaction to like knowing people were watching me do my work was to like cut up with people and talk to, and like my voice is in the background and all this footage or whatever. And I get going so fast that it's like this whole thing went by and I didn't like take a second to just stop and like feel what the room feels like or soak in a certain moment. And that's something that I have to physically make myself do on a wedding day over and over again, recenter, refocus, like what's happening right now, what is going on in this moment right now. I'm not thinking about, we're trained to think about and anticipate so many things that are coming up, the ceremony's in 40 minutes and this is happening, but just like, what is this real bride doing with her real mom right now as they're really getting ready when, I know their story, I know how important this is, and little things that I've started doing. One of my favorite new prompts, especially if a mom and her daughter are close, is like, if she's helping her get dressed, I will just say, hey, why don't you guys just take a second, turn around and hold hands and just look at each other. Just like take this moment. You guys have been, and immediately I just posted one of these to my reels the other day on Instagram. Like the mom looks at her daughter and it's like the first time that she's seen her little girl with the makeup done and the dress on, and like all of these emotions hit, and you can just be quiet and be still in that moment. And like the depth that adds to your film. Where else can you do that kind of thing during the day? And then you start to really see this beauty of these two big stories really coming together and colliding, and you can have so much creative fun with it. And it really does start by just stopping and observing what's going on, listening to what they're saying in the contact form, listening to what they're saying in the meetings, being quiet, jotting down notes. Like, you as the filmmaker don't need to be the hero in the situation. Yeah. And I think that so many times I feel like I have to be that because, well, they're paying me a lot. And they're, anyway, What thoughts, Mac, do you want to add to that? I know that was a random ramble, but.
No, that's so good. And it's a reminder that I always give myself. And I think filmmakers would do themselves a good service to do that, because like you said, like that's what we're ultimately there to capture, is these feelings, these moments. Yes, the decor and all that is great, and that'll play a part, but ultimately everything leading up to this day is all those feelings, all those relationships, all those journeys. And so getting a glimpse into, like you were saying, the mother, the bride, and the bride's history and their story in that moment, that's huge. And if you are able to, like you say, just kind of shut up and back off and let them be present in that moment, it is so strong. It will make your film so much better. Mm-hmm. And that's a great prompt. We've started doing similarly, even in like during portrait time, just be like, hey, you guys probably haven't had much time to just like soak it in today. Like go over there and just hang out for a bit and reflect on things. And that couples often say that's like their favorite part. Like that was such a good restart for them to, enjoy later on in the night as well. And it's just, if everyone was more present, everything would run smoother.
Yeah, I think just being present is so huge on a wedding day. And again, just I think of the films that Jen and I are most proud of and how we've put them together. And it was just, the intentionality and listening and being present and having conversations and getting to know them better. And, not every wedding you film, it's going to fall into that. Sometimes you can do the best thing that you want to do, through your website or through your films or however you're doing stuff to vet people. Like, I want people that are interested in diving in deep to this, or I want people that do this, or, whatever. But sometimes it doesn't happen. And so I think the thing that we just need to keep at the forefront of our mind is for us always to do the best with what we've been given. And sometimes you're going to pump out something creative and encouraging and all the very positive words that you can think of whenever you create a film. And sometimes they're just going to be, hey, I showed up, I filmed a wedding, I did a really good job. I don't think I could have done better. I wish the film maybe would have been different, but with what I had, I did absolutely the best I could do. And sometimes that's the only thing you can ask for. So, it's true. Yeah, Mac, we've been talking a lot about, story and intentionality behind your films and stuff. And speaking of story, I know that you have a fun product out there on the market. Yeah, that I think could really help and benefit many of our listeners. And I just want to give you an opportunity to talk about it for a sec.
Totally. So we put together last year something we call the Story Masterclass. This is all of our 16 years of experience and knowledge poured into one class that is online, and it is so powerful. The last year, we've seen so many amazing testimonials from people who have taken it that it's just changed the game for them, and people who have just gotten started and people who have been doing this for a good long time have all said such amazing things. And it's really focusing in on the mechanics of storytelling and diving into examples and story structure, but also the whole wedding filmmaking process as well. So just recently for this year, we've actually created an updated lesson that is in there, expanding on story structure. that I think will give people a whole lot more in-depth knowledge about kind of our approach and what we think is strong for creating story-driven wedding films. So yeah, if you're interested in demystifying storytelling in wedding films and learning more about story structure, I think it's I'm a little biased, but I think it's pretty dope class. So yeah, so we're it's going to be open for a bit longer. We closed it recently, opened it again, and it's going away here April 24th. So jump on it.
Open this week for people to join. It's so cool as whatever we would consider ourselves, Nick, in the wedding industry for education for filmmakers. It's fun to see people that are experts in specific areas creating content. I can't imagine what I would have been able to do with my business if I would have had this. I mean, I've watched through some of it, and it's like changing the way that I'm doing things as a veteran in the industry or whatever, a seasoned pro, someone long in the tooth, whatever you want to call me. But it's like, oh yeah, old works too. Ancient. We can keep going, but anyway, like the idea that like continually, I'm a constant reader. I'm a constant learner. I've got 4 new books stacked on my desk right now. I'm always wanting more knowledge. That little bit of oomph, that little X factor that's going to take my films to the next level. That's going to take my business to the next level, because I know that education really pays off. And watching all that you did to put into this course, seeing the people that go through it, watching before and afters of people's videos before they went through the course, after they went through the course, and just like the difference in their storytelling. These kinds of things really make a difference when couples are hiring, because that's really, when you think about it, you think about the Marvel universe, the story, like the billions and billions of dollars that that my daughter and I are watching through them again right now, and it's like, oh, the storytelling and but like, we love stories, and we are attracted to stories all the way back to parables in the Bible. It's stories. It's like you learn better with stories, and like you can really attract people. You're talking about stories on your own website and your about page and then getting them into your ecosystem and then telling their stories. And that is going to attract more people that want to spend more money and see the value in story. And so where can they head over to pick up or look at that course? And are there any special promos or anything like that going on?
Yes. So right now, if you go to thestorymasterclass.com, you will see the course is available at the best price it's ever been available at. And then also, if you put in the little coupon thing there, HTFW, you get an extra percentage off. So jump on that.
And just to double check, it's open for this price just for the rest of this week, closes early next week if you're listening to this live. And it'll be closed down after that for a bit. You kind of do that just to kind of make sure that you're getting the right people in and you're not overwhelming too many people joining at one time. Exactly. I've been watching from behind the scenes as you've been pouring even more into it. I'm excited about the new lesson. Before we sign off today, outside of the story masterclass, if there's anything, is there anything else that you want to make sure that we talk about? And if not, where can people find you online just to like connect with you?
Well, what jumps to mind is I just got to give you two a shout out for everything you guys are doing in this industry. You've opened the doors for a lot of people. Yeah. But you're
about
doing
time
really
somebody said
thing.
It. Yeah. I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Be nice. Sorry.
That's all right. No, you guys are doing just such awesome stuff and empowering filmmakers, young and old, to do amazing things. If I've been around, I think as long as you have, John, doing this, and if this kind of thing was available from a variety of sources when I got started, it would have been a game changer. You're helping people just leapfrog ahead to better themselves and better their filmmaking process. I meant that mainly for Nick. John, you do a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you to Nick. Yeah, thanks, Nick.
But if you want to find anything more from us, if you go to our website, hellotomorrow.ca, or on Instagram, we're at hellotmrw. And yeah, if you have questions about the course, shoot me a DM. I'm going to be doing stuff all week, answering questions about that stuff.
Sounds great. All right. Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast, and I'm sure we'll have you back on soon and cannot wait to see you again in real life, my friend.
Likewise. So stoked. Thanks, guys.
See ya. Well, McLean, thank you for being on the podcast today. We really appreciate it. Head over to thestorymasterclass.com if you would like more information about Hello Tomorrow's Masterclass. We also want to invite you to head over to howtofilmweddings.com/store, and there you can check out our brand new website templates. Austin from The Creative, who's also on our team, has put together 7 website templates made by a wedding filmmaker for wedding filmmakers. This isn't a creative person or a photography's website. These are actually made for wedding videographers. So if you need some help with a website, we would like for you to just go and give those a look. So John, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Listeners, thank you for tuning in. And until next time, we will see ya.
See ya.
Attention wedding filmmakers. The best resource for licensing music for your wedding films is MusicBed. I have been exclusively using MusicBed for about 8 years, and our films are better because of it. I hear a lot from our couples that reach out to us that our wedding films feel different, that the music isn't cheesy. MusicBed has a roster of incredibly talented musicians, bands, and composers who pour their hearts into their work, and you can hear the difference. Find the perfect song with MusicBed's intuitive search features like genre, mood, beats per minute, and my favorite, key. Head over to howtofilmweddings.com/musicbed to learn more and take your films to the next level. Use promo code HTFW23 at checkout to receive 1 month free with the purchase of an annual subscription. That's howtofilmweddings.com/musicbed.